How's it going? And I'm gonna try this instead. I'll probably sound a little bit better. No one's watching yet. Cool. Well, if you came in watching after the fact, you can see how some of the magic happens. Kevin, actually, how do I sound
You sound perfect now. Yeah.
now? All right. How's it going? And welcome to episode 204 of On the Wire, proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. I am Adam Howe, per usual, joined by my co-host Kevin Hasting. You can follow us where you follow us, and most importantly, on the Pitcher List Discord. So if you're not a PL Plus or PL Pro member, what are you doing? Change that right now and join us for all the fun in the Discord and for all the fun new toys that we'll be seeing as a PL Pro member very, very soon. So that's called a spoiler, folks. Or tease. I gotta get my terminology right. Kevin, it's been too long, man. It's been 2 weeks. Happy belated birthday. Hence why we took the time off last week. Enjoy yourself, relax. Hopefully you had a blast. How was the festivities?
Oh, it was great, Adam. Thank you so much. I know you said you had some things going on as well, but I will take the blame for there not being a show last week. My wife did surprise me last minute with a beach camping permit for the weekend. So we were at the beach from Friday morning till late Sunday afternoon. And every couple of hours, I would get out of my chair and walk into the ocean for a few minutes and go back to my chair. And when I was ready to go to sleep, I would get up out of my chair and crawl in the tent and go to sleep and get up in the morning and crawl back out to that chair and watch and listen to waves all weekend long. It was amazing. Thank you.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, I did have some stuff going on, but it was my excuses was not a good enough excuse. So the fact when you said what you had going, I'm like, I will take advantage. I will take the weekend off. Sorry for all those out there listening, but I did get some stuff done, so I do appreciate that time. And we take, I don't know, on average maybe 2 weekends off a year, and so we might have already used them up. So
We have already used them this
we
year.
don't get any more time off, Kevin. But we got a lot. You know what? Because we did take the week off, we were just talking about this beforehand. I'm like, oh, we have a lot of news to catch up on. So we're gonna do a little bit of a lightning round here, but we do have quite a bit to get through. So we're gonna go one by one here. Of course, this is news that is just always going to pile up this time of year, especially in the first couple weeks or even couple days of spring training. You start seeing random injuries come about. You start seeing playing time quotes from managers, expectations, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not surprising that we have a lot of these will be very quick. A couple of them, maybe we know they're worth diving into a little bit more. Let's start off with a negative here, with an injury. Sean Manaea was diagnosed with a strained right oblique. That is not the only oblique I think we will be talking about today, unfortunately. Obliques, even this early on in spring training, are worth monitoring because they are the one kind of like nagging injury that will nag you not only for a couple of weeks, but may come back all season long. How worried are you about Sean Manaea?
Well, so he's going to start the season on the 15-day IL. And the optimistic version is that's just because he won't have time to ramp back up, that he should be back to pitching by opening day. However, that's best case scenario. And like you said, this isn't the only oblique we're going to talk about. But obliques can be funny. Yeah, they grade them, this by severity. But I just don't feel like there's a standard timeline for oblique injuries, even if they're of the same severity, that at least that we think they're the same severity. So I'm concerned here. The good thing, I think it's a good thing for those that have already drafted Sean Manaea, is the Mets pitching staff in general has been decimated, right? So we're we were talking early in the offseason, is David Peterson going to get the 4 or 5 spot in this rotation? All of a sudden, he's the number 2. So
Sure.
there somewhat, I would think a veteran like Mania. Yeah, they'll get him back as soon as they think he is ready at all. They will not slow this. That's the one positive, I think. But he is going to miss a little bit of time to start the season.
I mean, positive isn't exactly the word I would use when describing how the Mets treat injured players, especially when they might be feeling a little bit of pressure to bring somebody back maybe sooner than they're ready to come back. Sean Manaea, just signed the contract. He, is coming back after a season of having some decent success with the Mets last year. The Mets have a little bit of a track history of pushing some guys in with the timetable that maybe brings them back a little bit early. So I'm not saying I'm worried about it, but it's something I would be monitoring as he is coming back. If he comes back on day 16 of the season, I don't hear like 100% confidence from everybody involved, I'm going to definitely treat that like a still ill, as Nick Pollock would say, with that first start back. I'm not necessarily going to trust that first start back. As I'm showing here now, of course, you can tell exactly where the news broke in the ADP chart on NFBC, where his picks started basically just plummeting right around the last week of March, around the 24th, going from getting picked around 170, 164 to on average around like 288, 285. So a good 100,
Yeah, I thought it was about
difference.
100 picks.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you are in a spot where you can stash an IL spot or 2 or 5, yeah, sure. I mean, fine. That's perfectly fine. And if NFBC, if that's something that I'm not sure that's something I want to, definitely pay a premium for. And you can see that from the trends that we're already seeing. Cool. Well, let's go to a more positive thing, something that literally should have surprised absolutely nobody. Kyle Finnegan is returning to the Nationals with a 1-year deal. No matter how much we make fun of the fact that how the Nats dealt with Kyle Finnegan and not only his arbitration, but just like whether or not they should trade him or not and get some value and letting him walk. What kind of role do you expect Finnegan to go back into that closer role for the Nationals?
I do. However, I think the job is pretty safe, but as we've talked about all offseason, Washington, an improved team, really, really tough division. So, with Atlanta, Philadelphia, the Mets. So I don't know that we expect them to be a playoff team, but if they overperform and get to that point, and then we see some of the bumps in the road that we've seen with Finnegan in the past, right? He gets us saves. His ratios aren't great, right? But he is their ninth inning guy, has been the last 2 seasons, and that's been wonderful for those that rostered him. And that will be the case to start the season. But I don't think his leash is going to be as long as it was in the past, since they are an improved team. That's the only caution that I would have. But to start out, yeah, he's the guy.
Here's the question. It's a 1-year deal. Do the Nats do the thing that we all expected them to do last year and the year before that and trade him at the deadline if he's still the closer come mid-July and showing value to contenders? Or was it less so about the Nationals not taking advantage of the value and more so other teams seeing through the smoke and mirrors that he actually was?
That's what I think it is.
Yeah, all right.
Like, on a lot of teams, especially contenders, he would not be one of the best 3 relievers in the bullpen. So $6 million, even though prorated, that's getting up there as far as reliever money a little bit. It's less than it was either 8 or 8.5, I believe, when they could have kept him for. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
So they saved a couple $1,000,000 already. Yeah, that could be an issue. I don't think other teams look at him as even a high leverage guy. I think that's the issue there with the trade.
So if he doesn't get traded or they don't trade him, yeah, he could keep this job all year round. So it's one of those things where it's like maybe you get closer to the trade deadline and you need a closer. Maybe you're on the other side. Maybe you're trading for Finnegan in those types of situations, thinking that the team who's rostering him now is thinking they're getting a good deal because they just assume Finnegan's going to get traded out of that closer role. So you're going to play a little bit of a cat and mouse job in July, and maybe you come out on top if you find a good trade partner. Again, we'll go from good news, bad news, or bad news, good news, back to some bad news. Nico Horner, with an elbow injury, has announced he will not travel with the Cubs to Tokyo for that initial series. So you're not going to get a free look at a Nico Horner. But are you worried about Horner come the real regular season opener?
I don't think so. I kind of expected this, and I mean, it hasn't been as bad as Zach Nato as far as it's not having information, but we haven't had anything really, really clear on a timeline for Nico Horner.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like opening day or sometime around then we should see him back. So I'm not too worried about him missing too much time. What this will give us another player or two to pay attention to in that opening couple of games, right? Or maybe even your last pick in if you're drafting before that series, a John Birdie, Vidal Brujan. If they're going to get some time, you'll know whether you want them in your lineup for that weekend prior to having to set that lineup. And if there's a couple stolen bases, those types of things. So we might have an extra player to keep an eye on from that series that can help us out that opening weekend.
Yeah, this was a talk of my Glarf draft is like using that last pick on Cubs and Dodgers. Like trying like any of those relievers. It's a free pick. They play great. You can make sure you put them in your lineup and then drop them in the first FAAB period or second FAAB period. And if they don't play, then you drop them in the first FAAB period. It's a win-win. So yeah,
if I'm remembering right, Daniel Hudson last year when drafted him for the one win, but I think the weekend we had to have him in our lineup to get that one win. He picked up a save, so we got one of each out of him.
We did.
We wouldn't have had him in our lineup that weekend if it wasn't for the win he got in Japan.
But the thing is that he went for big money in that first FAAB period if you didn't draft him. So you can save yourself the trouble if you just use your last two darts in the 30-round draft on these types of guys. It doesn't. What harm does it do? Absolutely nothing. And you can again always make up for it in that first FAAB period and spend a couple, $1 or $2 to replace them if necessary. But you save yourself maybe at least double digits, if not triple digits, worth of FAAB dollars if they do something really, really good, like Hudson did. I mean, Hudson earned the triple digit bids that some people were playing. I mean, a win and a save guaranteed. Yeah, I'll spend $100 on that. I got to spend it at some point anyway. Let's go with another missing in action here. Andrew Benintendi. He's going to miss the first anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks due to a fractured hand. I mean, were you targeting Benintendi? And probably not. But even if so, this is more of what opening does this create for the White Sox in the outfield, or DH for that matter, just as players are able to be shifted around the lineup.
Yeah, I wasn't targeting Andrew Benintendi, but I had come around to seeing the value really late in draft and holds for Andrew Benintendi. He was going to get plenty of playing time near the top of the lineup and produced better last season than we had seen in 2023. But not a target, no. And in redraft leagues, I wasn't even paying him any attention. And I'm probably still not, with it being the White Sox lineup, unless you're at the very top, I probably have zero interest. And, I tend to agree as you pull it up here with Jason over at Roster Resource. If Joey Gallo is going to get large side platoon at bats because of this, that does make me perk up a little bit, and then I realized it's been a long time since we've gotten good production out of Joey Gallo. So,
Sure.
yeah, I don't think there's much here.
Yeah, I mean, just two like veteran non-roster invitees on this. Just I don't. I want to
I would be
get
interested
rid of the
if
screen.
Michael A. Taylor gets regular playing time. That would interest me
Well,
in
at least
benefiting
Michael A. Taylor's
Flash.
already on the roster,
Right.
so he's got that
They have
going.
him short side platoon on roster resource at the moment, but he's probably better versus same handed pitching than Gallo and Drury at this point. So we might see Michael A. Taylor get regular run for a while, and if that's the case, I would be interested, especially that first weekend FAAB period. If I've lost somebody due to injury, that type of thing, he'd be a nice fill in.
Mhm. Well, let's talk about another fill-in option here because the Yankees are going to be without Giancarlo Stanton with an elbow injury of his own. He's going to begin the season on the IL and undergo a third round of PRP injections in his elbow on Monday. There's no timetable to any possible return for Stan at this point. Obviously, freeing up or at least making the DH spot for the Yankees that much more flexible. How do you foresee the Yankees taking advantage? Well, that's not the right way of putting it, but how are the Yankees going to adapt to having a more flexible DH spot in their lineup with Stanton missing an undisclosed period of time?
Yeah, this doesn't sound good. This could be a long term thing. Um, 3 rounds after an offseason off. When we last saw him, he looked as healthy as we'd seen him in a long time. And maybe that's a problem. Maybe he was playing through things and letting the adrenaline take him through the postseason. Who knows? But the type of injury and third round of PRP injections after an off season, granted, did have the extra games in the postseason, but that just does not sound good to me. I think it solidifies some playing time for Ben Rice. And we saw flashes, especially when he first came up. Then it appeared that the book was out on him and
Yeah.
he couldn't make contact at all. So if he can make that adjustment back, and there's been some positive talk from Aaron Boone and others this spring training on Ben Rice's performance. So that's what I would keep an eye on, because if he indeed has improved and can make contact, his quality of contact is amazing. So if he can make some contact and get some run, it could be long term, and I would be interested.
Yeah, and the other talk about the Yankees that I saw was just the announcement that Cody Bellinger will be playing most of his time in center field, which is not a huge surprise, based on Jason Dominguez's being moved over to left field, and then signing of obviously Paul Goldschmidt, obviously going to take over first base. But with the addition or the opening at DH that Stanton creates, it does allow the Yankees to be a little bit more flexible and give Bellinger a breather and throw somebody else in center field who can handle it on a day here or there and move some guys around. So if nothing else, losing a guy like Stanton at least just gives them more flexibility, which ultimately, I don't know, doesn't necessarily give any one player more playing time. If anything, it gives the opportunity to give a little bit of less playing time to a bunch of players just to give them rest, especially early on in the season. So it's just something to monitor. All right, one more here before we take our first break. Sean Murphy is also going to be missing for 6 weeks. Stop me if you've heard this one before regarding Sean Murphy. This is not news or not breaking news when it comes to Murphy. He's been down this road before, but this time it's with a cracked rib. Can literally not catch a break here with the catcher in Atlanta. What kind of doors is this open? Obviously, with d'Arnaud not being there as the backup, which obviously would have been the easy answer here. Does Atlanta have an easy answer to fill in that the bulk of the plate appearances from behind the plate?
Well, I think a lot of fantasy players were hoping the easy answer was Drake Baldwin, but they also have Chadwick Trump on the roster, and there was a report earlier on Friday that they are looking at free agents to bring in as well. So I would kind of temper my expectations on Drake Baldwin. I wouldn't just start automatically drafting him in a spot where I think he's the starting catcher for Atlanta. The biggest takeaway for me, though, is I'm going to have zero interest in Sean Murphy when he returns.
Sure.
Because the past 2 seasons, when we have seen him performing amazingly and then suffer an injury, he has been bad when he came back. He has not been good coming back from injury the past couple of seasons. I'm sure it probably has something to do with concentrating on running the pitching staff and defense. But coming back from missed time as a catcher, going to be a little more difficult than some other positions. But and it could be just physical as well. Maybe he comes back early, those types of things. But it when people start bidding on Sean Murphy because he's coming back and people had to drop him that drafted him early, I'm hopefully I'm in a position where I can stay away there.
Yeah, as I pull up his, Sean Murphy's at least the 2024 process plus rolling chart, you see that coming back from that first missed time in the beginning of the season, not so bad, at least as far as his process goes. But when he missed time closer to the end of the summer, he did not finish the season strong at all, coming back in limited capacity. And so that's just last year. But you're right, like throughout the course of 2023 and prior to that, not somebody who, I mean, he's got a lot on his mind, right? He's a catcher by default. He's got a lot going on.
Exactly.
He doesn't have the luxury of just DHing and worrying about his swing and worrying about hitting. Not only is he worrying about defense and hitting, and then he's also dealing with the pitching staff and a pitching staff that was in flux quite a bit in the last 2 years as well, bringing in a lot of younger guys coming in, bringing in the addition of like Chris Sale and like guys who have very strong personalities that I'm sure are making waves as far as like how they want to do things and getting adapted to the staff as well. And Sean Murphy has to kind of juggle all of that at the same time while still coming back from his own injuries.
Right. And Drake Baldwin, I feel will be overpriced if it is announced he has the job, because he's a new shiny new thing, right? A different shiny new thing that we didn't know we had this early, right as the season is beginning. So I think he's going to be overpriced. However, that Atlanta lineup, any veteran catcher they bring in, I'll take a good hard look.
Yeah, I mean, you think that they would get that. I mean, I was showing it earlier, but they have a couple of catcher non-roster invitees in camp at the moment. Sandy Leon being the name that stood out to me first, just because he'd been around for so long. So, a couple opportunities for some guys to remake themselves in a very positive situation with the Atlanta organization. All right, like I said, we are going to take a quick break, but we got a lot more news to cover. We'll be right back. All right, right back to it, Kevin. Jose Quintana, he signed a 1-year deal with the Brewers. Good for him, getting a little bit of payday here. Not a long-term deal, though. But in a situation where he can go right into the rotation, but is it at the expense of somebody else that you might have been more interested in from the Brewers?
Well, I don't know it's at the expense of anybody else. Speaking of obliques, Aaron Ashby was looking like he may get that 5th spot, strained oblique. Brandon Woodruff says he's going to be ready to go. We don't know for sure. So that is intriguing. But until then, Jose Quintana slides in to this rotation. And just like with the Cardinals and the Mets, he's going to be somebody I'm very interested in as a team streamer and as a waiver wire ad throughout the season as a streamer in the leagues where he's not drafted. So yeah, he's sliding in. He's taking Wade Miley's spot in Milwaukee.
That's a good point. That's a good point right there. Quintana's just one of those guys where, like, if I'm going to pull out, I'm going to make sure I'm not talking out of both sides of my mouth. But yeah, 2023 notwithstanding, like pretty, he's got a plenty of 160, 170 inning seasons within his career. So just coming back from 170 and a third last year, and 165 and two thirds in 2022. So, this is somebody that I think you can, at the very least, rely on to be there and be there most of the season, pending, he's a pitcher. Pitchers can get injured no matter what. But this is not somebody that I'm targeting as somebody who I expect to be injured, at any given time. All right. More pitcher injury news here, of course. Luis Heel, diagnosed with a high-grade lat strain. He'll be shut down for at least 6 weeks. That doesn't mean he's returning in 6 weeks. It just means he's not doing anything. And so I like to just basically double that when I hear shut down. Shut down for 6 weeks means then you need another 6 weeks to ramp up before you're ready to go at best. So how much damage does this do to Luis Heel's, perceived value, at least in your eyes? And again, what opening does this create in the rotation?
This makes him a do not draft for me going forward.
Hmm.
I have drafted him, and I'll try to hold on to him as long as I can. But like you said, at least doubling that's 3 months. And when it's a lat, I'm not going to be comfortable with the low end of a time frame either. So I think this is at least the All-Star break. Um, I think the Yankees fans that were wondering why Marcus Stroman hadn't been traded yet are probably a little happy because he's going to slide right into the rotation now.
Yeah.
I don't know if happy's the right word, but
Yeah.
they have somebody to take Heel's spot in the rotation. And so yeah, and I've been looking at Marcus Stroman, right? Knowing he's probably the sixth there, knowing every team uses a sixth guy at some point, but not pulling the trigger. And now at the end of drafts, if I need to shore up my rotation, yeah, I'll throw Marcus Stroman in there.
Yeah. Yankee fans do have a different way of showing happiness,
Right.
in general. Um, all right. Yeah. With Clark Schmidt, at least Jason over at Roster Reekers has Stroman all the way up at the 4 spot. Clark Schmidt, of course, filling in that 5th spot. And there's not really an obvious 6th man unless we look down into their, if they're going to invite somebody else to compete, or somebody else comes back comes back from injury a little bit earlier.
It I know what Yankee fans want, and that's because he's been awesome this spring, and that's Will Warren. But I still
Sure.
don't think that happens when you still have Marcus Stroman on the roster. It gets him a step closer, but when you have Marcus Stroman on the roster, he's getting that spot first.
Yeah, obviously Warren already making his debut. He is on the 40-man, so this would not be a stretch per se. But if there's not a rotation spot for Warren, I agree. He's not on the roster. All right. So this one, I saw the news. Of course, I thought of you immediately, Kevin, just because we just talked about him and his inconsistency of actually seeing him out there. Chase DeLauder underwent a sports hernia surgery. He's going to miss another 8 to 12 weeks due to that. And it's starting to pile on. Chase DeLauder is starting to remind me a lot of like Alex Kirilloff, somebody that we had all the expectations, like seeing what, different profile, but just the fact that you just could not stay healthy enough to get any kind of a run.
Brendan Davis is another one for me that I really wish we could see him healthy.
Brendan's never made, he never made his debut. DeLauder has not made his debut. It's one of those things where you expected DeLauder to be up at this point if it weren't for all these injuries. So, yeah, I mean, do you think we even see DeLauder at the major league level this year, or not?
I hope so. It's just becoming more and more doubtful. Unfortunately, as you said, it's just been one injury after another, and Cleveland needs him. They need at least they need a player like him, like what we think he can be. So it's a big hit to them as well. But he's still young enough that they will not rush him. But hopefully, you know, if he gets in games, June, maybe by the end of August, we see him. And that would be great. But I highly doubt it would be before that, because even that would only be 2 months of ramp up time after he comes back from this injury.
Fair enough. All right, another oblique. This one a little bit more on the positive side. We have Bruce Bochy coming out and saying Adolis Garcia's oblique injury will not stop him from being ready for opening day. Uh, how much faith are you putting in? A lot of times we'll say when a manager tells us something, sometimes we just have to listen. And then other times we hear a manager talking, we're like, are they just posturing? Are they just trying to tell us what we want to hear? Or they're trying to pump up the player so that, they feel like their confidence is there. How much confidence do you have in what Bochy has to say about Garcia? And if there are enough people in your league that aren't believing him, are you targeting Garcia, expecting him to be ready for opening day?
Yes, I was already targeting Garcia, and I hope that this means I can continue to target him and maybe do that a round or two later. I when it's a veteran manager talking about a veteran player and they're blowing off something like an oblique as precautionary, that I tend to believe that. If it's a young guy, then and the manager's kind of avoiding the question and saying, "We'll see, maybe he could be ready." That I'm like, "There's no way he's going to be ready." Veteran manager, veteran player. I'm in on Odalis being back for opening day.
All right, well, let's go to the complete opposite of that with the announcement. Gunnar Henderson is dealing with a mild intercostal strain, and as a younger player, on a quote younger team, the Orioles they're not saying all the most positive things. They are saying, quote, they are very hopeful he'll be ready for opening day. So the combination of all of those things that you just talked about with a younger player as opposed to an old a veteran, and not saying the confident words that we hear from Bochy about Garcia's oblique. How hopeful are you about Henderson, and are you, does this kick him out, at the very least, kick him out of the first round consideration in most drafts?
Um, I've already passed on him. I have drafted Gunnar Henderson, but in a couple of other drafts where he was on the board, I've I've passed, and um, I'm not sure why, because he had an absolutely amazing season. He hasn't given us any reason to doubt him. But for some reason, I just prefer some of the other first round players, mid to late first round players, a little more. But I do not like the words "very hopeful."
Hopeful.
I don't like that at all. Um, that to me is he's not going to be ready to start the season. When I see "very hopeful" he'll be ready, I say no, he's not.
That's good. I like the translation, just very succinct there.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that even if he is ready, though, just based on that report, like he's not going to be ramped up enough for it to be useful. I mean, you can see he didn't start the beginning of last season super strong either. Obviously, he can make up for it as he did throughout the course of the season. Um, in a roto league, that's all you really care about. So I mean, if you're still drafting him, hope if he's not ready and he's still playing, like he's not on the IL, you can bench your first round pick for the first week just to kind of see him ramp up. If you're confident you're not gonna, miss out on much in that first week or two. So not something to completely write off, especially if you are right in that like mid to late first round and you're like, oh, he's still sitting there. Can't find myself to pass off on that opportunity. All right, we got another oblique strain, but this one was avoided by Christian Walker. He'll be eased back into play, but he had missed a couple of days in spring training. Do we, with his new team in Houston, obviously that signing was extremely exciting to most people. Again, it's still an oblique. injury of some sort, may not have been a strain, but it was obviously some kind of irritation to keep him off the field for a little bit. Are you monitoring this? Are you adjusting your draft targets on Walker? It doesn't necessarily open any doors immediately, but how deep are you looking into the Houston roster to see, what kind of adjustments you might be able to make on the fly?
Um, I think he's going to be fine as well. This is similar to Adolis Garcia here. Veteran player. I think something was uncomfortable, maybe tight, maybe even felt like he pulled something. They monitored it, did the testing. It's fine, and we're going to ease him back in. We're not just throwing him back out there either, right? So, I don't have an issue with this. It was worrisome for
Of
a day or two until we got that second batch of news on it. When we just heard that they were saying oblique strain, right, for a day or two there, that was worrisome. But no, I think he's fine right there where he's being drafted, just inside the top 100 over the past couple weeks.
Yeah, I actually want to pull this up. It didn't seem like there definitely was a dip recently in his ADP in the last couple of drafts, going, in the 130, 140 range, where he's normally going, top 100 pick.
But some were still taking him.
Yes, they
Some
were.
some drafts he was still going in his normal spot. So there was a wide. It depended on the room you were in.
Oh, absolutely. Or like where you were in the draft when you heard the news broke. And you're like,
Yes.
ah. And so it's just these are always funny to watch, and it's like you kind of see the patterns, and you're like, oh, I'm not taking that risk. I think this happened with last or 2 years ago with Max Muncy, where everybody, you had no idea what kind of injury he was actually dealing with because nobody was talking about it, and he was dropping to like 250. And then all of a sudden, by the time spring training rolls around, he wasn't going top 100, but like he was jumping back up at least 100 picks. So it was a little bit of a roller coaster. You actually, you did end up getting a good deal overall by getting him at 250. But you really just didn't know. Like you were completely shooting in the dark. All right, let's go into a couple of
One
pitchers.
thing real quick, Adam, you reminded me of as you were talking about where you were when the news broke, when we were looking at that ADP for I did something I hadn't had happen to me in many years. I was at work and the "you were on deck"
Oh,
went off right when it was completely quiet in the office and everybody's looking. So I started looking around too, like, what was that? Whose computer's making
yeah, who was
noise?
that? It couldn't be me. So
I hadn't had that happen in years, but
same
it finally happened again.
Same thing happened to me just the other day. I pulled up my phone and I opened up the draft room and I happened to be on the clock. And it wasn't the "you are on the clock." It was just the ding ding.
The ding.
And then, so my wife asked me, like, "Did you just open like the Southwest app? Like, what was that?" I'm like, "No, I'm just on the clock. I got to take this." Speaking of which, we didn't even bring it up, but we're all in some drafts at the moment.
Yeah,
It's
that's
been
the two
fun.
I have going right now. Yeah.
Yeah, TGFBI, Raz Slam, very different, obviously,
Yep.
formats and team construction, but it's been fun just to like, obviously, there's a lot of talk on these types of these industry type leagues where they're free but they're being played on a platform that obviously is typically routed at or directed at people who are playing for big money, or at least big buy-ins, and so there's always a mix of communication about how many people are taking it seriously and how many people are putting all their effort into it throughout the course of the year. I find the draft, at the very least the draft portion of these, to be the most liberating part of draft that I'll do all season. Yeah, I will take some more risks, but a lot of times, like after I look at my final roster, I'm like, oh, I actually love this roster better than some of the ones I spent more effort and time looking into. So the drafting has been a lot of fun. I don't know how yours is. How have you felt about your draft so far?
Similarly, I really like how things are going, and I did it a little differently than I've done most drafts. I started hitter, and then went 5 straight pitchers.
Okay.
2 of those 5 top relievers, Clase and Munoz. But I like how I've been able to fill in the hitting, then not taking my third hitter till the eighth round. I really like how it's turning out so far. Now, I still have some things that have to work. We're through 14 rounds. I still only have those 5 pitchers. So I do need to start addressing pitching again as well soon. But uh, obviously I have needs on the hitting side for going 5 of my first 7 picks pitching. But so far I like it. And yeah, it's a blast doing something different. And like you brought up, last season I liked my TGFBI draft, and I did things a little differently than I've been doing through draft season. So I didn't completely go that direction, but I did keep some of that in mind for our bigger drafts that are coming up over the next 2.5 weeks. Adam, opening day is less than 3 weeks away.
Yes. True opening day. And I'm going to say actual opening day is even sooner than that.
Less than 2 weeks away.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Baseball games that actually matter coming up within eyesight. So that is exciting. All right, we do have 2 more pieces of news. We're going to close it out with a couple of pitcher news here. We're going to do that though.
Yeah, the big ones.
Yeah, some big ones. So we'll leave you in suspense as we take a quick break. All right, this one is funny because Kevin, you put this outline together for me this week, and I'm actually reading this for the first time. I was not even in tune with this one yet, and this one hurts. George Kirby is going to be shut down from throwing due to shoulder inflammation. That's all I know. Inform me, please, and tell me that I don't have to worry about where I have Kirby already drafted.
I wish I could.
Yeah, I know.
I'm worried. Now, sometimes shoulder inflammation, some rest, and shut down for a couple of weeks and ramp back up. It was maybe ramped up a little too early. Sometimes it works out that way, but typically shoulder inflammation leads to other things or is a precursor or an indication that other things are already wrong. So I am worried. Quite a bit of talk is Emerson Hancock. That's who we have seen when Seattle has needed a 5th starter in 2024. I'm assuming that's what we'll see at least to start the season. And then I did see some speculation on some of the non-roster invitees that they have: Luis Castillo, Casey Lawrence, Jonathan Diaz, Logan Evans. I've seen some speculation on some of these guys. I think it's going to be Emerson Hancock, and he didn't perform the way we were hoping he might when we did get to see him at the major league level in 2024. But he's got that prospect pedigree, so could just be a tweak. We know Seattle's done amazing at developing this pitching staff over the past few years. So if they can get Hancock on track, he may be in this rotation for a while. Hopefully Kirby is back soon, but I'm going to expect he's out till at least May.
Yeah, even one of those things where
ramp up time,
if he comes back early, are you confident in what he'll actually go out there and how many innings he'll get in an outing and things of that nature as well? So, like you said, ramp up time. You have to take that into consideration. I'm rooting for Luis F. Castillo just to see how many Luis Castillos they can put in one rotation.
There you go.
So there we go. And I just can't wait also for like all the misbids and the misdrafts of drafting the wrong Luis Castillo from the Mariners, because those will be plenty of screenshots out there as well. All right, last one here. Another pitcher who will not be ready for opening day due to an elbow injury. Grayson Rodriguez of the Baltimore Orioles will not be ready for opening day. He will start the season on the IL as well. How long do you expect to wait on Grayson Rodriguez in 2025.
Again, it's just I'm not comfortable. Now, due to the area of drafts where he is typically taking, I don't have any Grayson Rodriguez shares. Not
Mhm.
completely lucky because I'm not anti Grayson Rodriguez, but I would be very concerned. Obviously, I'm holding him as long as I can, and hopefully he's back fairly early in the season. But again, this just seems like it's not just fatigue, right? It's a precursor to something else, or something else is already wrong that they haven't found yet. Is the vibe I get. So unfortunately, he would be off my draft board now. And I don't know. Hopefully he can start throwing again and ramp back up, and we see him early in the season.
Mhm.
Uh, I think I know we don't take a lot other than a few specific things out of spring training, but the performances of Sugano. I know some people early in draft season, Vlad Sedler was one that was excited about Sugano. That tempered for some, and some were never really interested. Kind of a soft tosser coming over. But we've seen some very successful seasons out of the pitchers like Sugano, especially their first season when people haven't seen them.
Mhm.
So I think he was already in the rotation, but they're definitely counting on him more now. We're probably going to see Cade Povich start the season in the rotation. Both of these guys, um, I would give a second look now, and a little bit of bump on my draft board.
So the question is now Grayson Rodriguez, as I had his ADP up just a minute ago, is going around the same time as Sugano is. You have them both available to you at around that pick. Who are you picking over each other? Like, which one are you picking? Sugano
Right, if
or
I'm drafting
Grayson?
right now,
Yep,
Sugano and who?
Grayson Rodriguez
Grayson Rodriguez has dropped that much, huh? So,
in a couple drafts.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. In a redraft league, I think I'm drafting Sugano.
just for that early.
I,
If
wa- I
nothing
want the
else,
health. I want the
yeah,
healthy pitcher to start the season.
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that'll close out our news for the day. And we did an episode like this around this time of year last year. So we're gonna do it again this year as we are ramping up all of our drafts. We're gonna take a look at the possibility of players hitting 2020. Hence the name of the episode, Hindsight 2020. We're look back, and we're just gonna look ahead. We're not gonna look back this time at guys that later on in drafts have the potential that at least we think that you can tap into and get that added advantage of getting a rounded player. Now, it's funny because I see players as I'm drafting early on, and my instinct is like, especially in the first like 5 rounds, I see somebody's like, oh, you're projected to be 2020, and I'm not saying they're projected to be 30-20 or like 35-25. I'm just saying 2020 at like just
Yeah.
and it doesn't feel exciting, right? It just doesn't
Right.
feel like somebody I need to target. Um, I look at PLV projections for next year, the version 3.5, which is out right now for PL Pro members. Of course, you have a whole lot of other projections you can look at too on like the Fangraph profile pages, and if you have subscriptions to Master Ball and all the other ones that are out there. I'm going to, of course, reference the PLV projections here. Only is he 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 guys this year. Last year, the projections that I was using, there were 19 guys that were projected to be 2020. So seems overall, at least PLV being a little bit more on the conservative side. A couple guys came kind of close in one direction or the other. But we've got most of them are all in the first 3 rounds, anywhere between, Bobby Witt, Ellie De La Cruz, Kyle Tucker, Corbin Carroll, Tatis Jr., Francisco Lindor, Jazz, Trey Turner, O'Neill Cruz, like all these, Michael Harris. These are all top 2 rounds in most 15-team drafts, right? Then we drop down a couple rounds and we start seeing Randy Arozarena, which obviously he has his own little warts, especially on the batting average side. Cedric Mullins just made it with 20 home runs and a couple more stolen bases. And then a couple rounds after that, we have Zach Geloff kind of rounding it out, at least on the projection side. So you're at least based on these projections, if you want a fully rounded player, at least from the projection side of things, you've got to pay up for it in the first couple rounds to kind of even it out. We all know that there's going to be players that you can get later on. You just have to know who you're targeting. So like how important, I mean, we talked a little bit about this a couple of weeks ago when we talked about like opportunity and just like in our category previews. But like how important is it to you to get a more rounded player, especially in the first two rounds? Or are you more willing to go like after somebody that is really going to outperform in one category? You make it up and basically get two players that, when combined, Captain Planet style, they create, two very good 2020 players.
Yeah. So it can go either way. But I think the first thing that comes to my mind when you ask me that question is uh, I was listening to Ariel Cohen on Beat the Shift. Yeah, Beat the Shift. Not too long
Podcast
ago.
of the year, Beat the Shift. Yes,
Yep,
congratulations to those
exactly.
guys.
Exactly. Congratulations to Ariel and Ruvain. That's amazing. And uh it was an outfield episode. So they were talking about, Ariel, always talking about value, right?
Of course.
That's his and Ruvain's thing, and using his ATC projections. And they're talking about outfielders, and they brought up guys like Lourdes Gurriel Jr. and Taylor Ward were a couple. Now, I don't think these are guys that I'm going to. I wanted to be able to fit Lourdes Gurriel Jr. in here, but I think we would be super excited if he even got to double-digit stolen bases.
Sure.
He could get to the 20 home runs. He had 7 stolen bases last year, I think. So, but their point was these veterans that do a little bit of everything, right? How valuable they are and how underdrafted they are because they're not exciting because they don't do that one thing exceptionally, right? So I think a lot of these guys are going to be veterans that we now think of as old and boring, but they could push uh, both 20 home runs and or stolen bases, be at least close in the other, be strong side platoon guys that if they played every day, they would definitely get there, but they might be more like 17 home runs, 15 stolen bases because they're a strong side platoon guy. Those types of players are, I think, very valuable. And the more of those types of players you can have on your team, the easier it is to react to injuries. You don't have to replace
True.
40 stolen bases when a guy gets hurt. You don't have to replace 30 home runs when a guy gets hurt. Now, it's harder to find a replacement that can do that little bit of everything that you need, but you're not taking a huge hit in an entire category and tanking your entire season. So I think that the fact that many of these guys we're going to talk about, especially in the later rounds, are going to be old boring,
Oh yeah,
which I like
absolutely.
drafting anyway.
Absolutely. I found myself in my last two drafts completely doing the opposite of that. And like
That's
really,
because you've been drafting for 4 months now, and now you want to start taking shots.
but I've also noticed that there's a lot more rabbits later on in drafts than I had noticed in the past. And I can take my shot on 2 or 3 of them as opposed to just trying to get the one that can make up for my power. And I'm not getting power late. Like power doesn't exist late. Simply, at least not power that I can rely on. The other side of the coin, the other logic that at least my brain is trying to convince me of is just the fact that I have almost more flexibility when I have a guy who does one thing really, really well, and I can bank some of those stats early on in the season, as opposed to a 2020 guy is going to stretch out 2020 all year round. But a 40 home run guy is going to get you those 20 home runs probably in the first half. You know what I mean? Those are also going to get spread out. And so you're consolidating that. So if this is a guy that does get injured, you're still able to you're able to find the other, maybe not all 20 of them or not all of the missing home runs. But I'm able to stream my way back into, I'm only streaming for that one category that I'm missing out on. Especially on the stolen base side. Like these stolen bases come in bunches. Home runs do too in a lot of situations, but like we see guys go off on the base pass. Like, I mean, Elliot Cruz is a bad example because he's obviously a first rounder. But like we've seen him steal 3 bases in one game, never mind in 1 week. So it's like these guys that are rabbits and they're stealing 50 bases in the season, they're not even stealing 50 bases from, April to September. They're stealing 10 in the 2 week period, and then maybe they take a week off, and then they steal another, 7 or 8 in the next week or so. So they come in these bunches, and if you can get those bunches early on in the season, you can feel like you kind of bank those aside. And similar to like saves, you get into a situation where you feel like you have enough of a cushion. You can feel more comfortable benching them or turning them into a team streamer throughout the second and third of the season as well. So that's where my brain's been going. Please tell me if I'm nuts and I'm just kind of repeating history, because I know I've read things and I've heard people talk about like, no, it's like it goes back to that Gallo pillow that that we talked about in the past, and like the Schwarber combo that you might be looking for nowadays for average. But average is different, I think, than the counting stats. In the fact that, again, these counting stats you can bank, and then you can kind of move on if necessary.
I think part of what helps at least this season is some of those rabbits have decent to good batting averages.
Sure.
So that helps. Perfect example of what you just brought up that I loved about drafting more than one, right? I just took within the past couple of rounds Victor Robles and TGFBI.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're that far? Congratulations.
Yeah. Yeah, we're in the 200s somewhere. And then I still am hoping. I mean, we haven't got to that part of the draft yet, but I'm still hoping to draft Jacob Young. I have him on a lot of teams. Now, I will not usually want both Victor Robles and Jacob Young in my lineup. It will drain my RBI and home run categories both too much if I try to play them both at the same time. But in a pinch over a weekend, if I have an injury, will I throw them in there together? Absolutely, and play the matchups with the two of them. And if one of them doesn't work out, he's a drop, right? So I love how you brought up that there's multiple now, whether it's the type of players that are being developed, the rules changes, all of it probably affects it a little bit. But yeah, I love that point.
Yeah, and these guys, at least, I mean, different guys drop in different leagues all the time, right? Not only just different league with different league mates, but different formats. And it's always interesting to do a couple drafts and then do TGFBI and then completely see, ADP get thrown out the window, because this, for a lot of people, is their first draft of the season, and they're completely ignoring ADP. They're just going by their own rankings that they put on, which I commend everybody to do that's doing that. But it is funny to see guys drop and or get jumped. I jumped a couple of pitchers in because I was in the middle of my round, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just doing it. And it felt good to do that, obviously, to, get your guy and get him wherever you felt like you were comfortable picking him. But now we've got options not only for these rabbits, but guys that, if you are trying to build a more rounded approach, there are options down the line, especially if you are looking to, take some chances. And you said a lot of these guys we're going to talk about are old and boring. So it's not like they're hurting you. And so these darts don't feel like darts. They just feel like glue, right? They just feel like
And
guys
there's
that can fill into a position. They can be your corner. They can be your middle. They can be your DH in most weeks as well, or fourth or fifth outfielder. And so let's get into a lot of these players that we have listed out here. We are going to do that after this quick break. All right, so we're going to go down. I gave you a list of guys that are actually projected. And most of them, like I said, are in the first 2-3 rounds of pretty much every draft. So we're going to go all the way down to round 10 and beyond. So the round 10 through round 30, guys that are currently going in those rounds based on online championship ADP of the last month. Of course, these are 12 teamers. So when I do rounds, I am considering this in a 12 team format. So you can use that with whatever grain of salt that you're using. So Kevin, a couple of guys that stood out again as a comparison to PLV projections. These are guys that PLV has projected them to be pretty close to 2020, but not quite there. Maybe they have 20 home runs, but only 12 stolen bases projected, or some of them are the opposite of that. They have 12 home runs and 20 stolen bases. Tell me, of this bunch, which one you think has the most likelihood of not only going 2020, but which one has the most likelihood of completely, getting through that? And I'll tell you the one that's the closest when I get to him as well. So we have Christian Yelich going at 110, Royce Lewis at 119, Ian Happ at 130, Bo Bichette at 128. He's obviously a lot closer to the home run total than the stolen base total, but he still has shown that, if he wants to run again, he does have the there is a possibility of him running once more. Ezekiel Tovar at 132, and then Anthony Volpe, the closest one of the bunch to being a true 2020, projected at 146. So of this group, of course, this is one of the larger groups as we are just in between rounds 10 and 12 here. Who do you like the most to, be a little bit more of a solid 2020 producer?
So the easy answer is Volpe, because not only does he have the projections of getting closest to it, but he has done it before. He did it in 23.
Mm-hmm.
Did it in 2023. Most projections agree with the PLV projections, and more the home runs will be the issue. Mid-teens home runs, and then closer to 30 stolen bases. So I get that, but I'm going to go with Ian Happ here. Old and boring. And but I just and the closest he's gotten to the 20 stolen bases at the MLB level is 14, and that was in 2023, and he had 13 last season. That's his only 2 seasons of double digits. He also had a nice success rate. Those 27 stolen bases over the past 2 seasons, only caught 5 times. So he is well over 80% success rate as well over the past 2 seasons. The Cubs, we've talked about this a little bit in the offseason, were a little streaky, it seemed, in their stolen base attempts last season. At times, they would go a couple of weeks, and it seemed like nobody was even attempting to steal bases, not even Nico Horner. All the guys ended up with the stolen bases that they were projected for. I mean, even Nico Horner got his 30. It seemed like he was getting none because he would go in long spells of not attempting one. And for a person that had never rostered Nico Horner before and then drafted him on his main event team because he needed stolen bases, it was maddening. But they were there. He did end up contributing the stolen bases he was drafted for. So it's tough to know what Craig Counsell and the Cubs are going to do for certain on the base paths. But over the past 2 seasons, he's gotten to that mid-teens. So that's where he needs to improve a little bit. 3 of the last 4 seasons, he has gotten the home runs. And I just think Ian Happ is one of the most valuable players in fantasy baseball where he's drafted. And unfortunately, others think that too, because you think you're taking him a round or two ahead of ADP and he still gets sniped from you.
Yeah, somehow. Yeah, I mean, ADP, he is right next to Bo Bichette, and they have at least PLV projections are very, very similar on the two. Bo Bichette has 2 more home runs, and Ian Happ has 2 more stolen bases. And so these guys are going back to back. But I would agree that Happ has the better chance of getting to 2020 than Bo Bichette does, which makes him that much more appealing in that realm. You can also, in that basically that same round, Randy Arozarena is projected to hit 2020. So you have an option in that area if you want something a little bit, quote, more guaranteed. Obviously, Arozarena comes with his own little warts to go along with
And
that as well.
Yelich, if what we see out of him in the first couple of weeks looks like he's comfortable after
Sure.
the the back surgery he had, if he's finally not going to have to monitor and monitor his workload due to those back issues, he's almost a given for 2020.
Yeah, I mean Yelich, Royce Lewis, both of these guys at the top or
Yeah.
the closer to the in the 10th round than the 12th. Not concerned about them if we can turn injuries off. And
Right.
so both of these guys again, yeah, I agree. If Minnesota's going to let Lewis run because they're not worried about him getting hurt, and Chris Yelich is comfortable enough, and like he's going to run as well. So also not worried about either one of those guys. I think that they more of a gimme and didn't want to talk about them because I am too worried about their injury history and not getting enough plate appearances to give them the opportunities. Let's skip down to rounds 13 through 15. A slightly smaller group here based on the projections from PLV. Josh Lowe at 148, Xander Bogaerts at 156, Bryson Stott at 167, and then Lane Thomas at 180. None of these guys I think are a given, but of the 4, Josh Lowe is the closest based on his PLV. As I pull up his projected to be, oh, hey, where'd you go? Hello, Josh. Control F, don't fail me now. Yeah, it's projected at 16 home runs and 25 stolen bases. So does add up to a 2020. You just have to redistribute some of those stolen bases. Does he play enough? I mean, that's obviously a question with his history as well. So of this group, which one are you the most confident in this draft range?
In this group, I am going with the player that has done it before, and it was 2023, just like Anthony Volpe, and that's Josh Lowe. I think the playing time does come back, and projections on Fangraphs, all the public available projections, have him upper teens. Like Steamer has him at 18 home runs, the Bad X 17 home runs, and every projection system has him making it in stolen bases. All of these in about 125 games, which is 15 more than he had in 2024, but 10 less than he had in 2023 when he accomplished it. And then it's the home run boost we need. And remember, the first half of this season, Tampa's playing about 60 of their 80 home games during the first half. To so you might get them all front loaded in the season as well.
I'm okay with that.
And yeah, and so yeah, Josh Lowe, I think I'm pretty excited about Josh Lowe this season. I don't have nearly enough shares of him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think honestly, I have not been. I've been so focused on the Athletics playing in West Sacramento that I almost totally forgot that Tampa was playing because they're still playing in Tampa. So you almost forget that they're playing in not only a minor league and like not a AAA stadium, but a high A ball stadium, a spring training stadium. Like this is the type of stadium that they're playing their home games
With the
in.
dimensions of Yankee Stadium, only it's going to be hot and humid.
Yeah,
And he's
with
a
no
lefty.
roof. Yep.
I don't think he has any problem getting to that 20 home runs.
Yeah, there you go. All right, let's skip down to round 16 through 18, a much larger group here, and it's just more old and boring / rounded players that you have an option for. Dansby Swanson at 185, Tyler O'Neill, who was dealing with his own injuries as well, which we didn't even bring up, at 188. Tommy Edman gets a pretty close. He needs a little power boost, but he's going at 190. The aforementioned Nico Horner at 202, Byron Buxton at 212, and Parker Meadows at 213. We all, no, I don't know if we all, but good majority of us want Byron Buxton to do it. I think that goes without saying as far as what our concerns are there. But of this group, then, Kevin, who do you think is the most likely to hit that 2020 mark?
Yeah, unfortunately, because Byron Buxton was my first thought. But he hasn't had over 14 stolen bases since 2017, and I just don't think they're going to give him the attempts to get there, even if he is healthy. They'll assume that not attempting to steal as many bases is part of what's keeping him healthy, I feel, unfortunately. I'd love to go with Tyler O'Neill, but like you said, already hurt again. We're used to that. Nico Horner, I don't think will ever hit 20 home runs, unfortunately. Parker Meadows is who I think most people would pick here. Young, exciting, hitting leadoff for Detroit. If he stays healthy, is probably the guy. But I'm going old and boring. And this guy, if Ian Happ is not one of the most or the most valuable player where he's drafted, and Dansby Swanson, his teammate, might
Right
be,
there.
because he's going to give you a little bit of everything. Mid-teens home runs and stolen bases are a certainty, and it wouldn't take a whole lot of luck to get him to 2020.
So I left a name off of here that I just wanted to talk about anyway. What are the odds that Michael Garcia can stop hitting the ball into the ground and actually hit the ball over the fence 20 times? Because he's going to get the stolen bases.
I don't know that he'll ever get to 20 home runs, but going into last season, and I still think this is a possibility, especially seeing what the Royals organization is doing with MJ Melendez. Some things we don't pay attention to a lot of spring training stuff, but when somebody is making a complete swing change, and so far it looks like
Paying off.
nothing but a good thing,
Yep.
then I feel like we can have confidence in their teammates as well due to that development staff. So going into last season, I think it was a text with you. You asked me, could we get 15-25 out of Michael Garcia? I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. I still think we could get a 15-40 season at some point, but I don't know that we ever get to 20.
All right. Well, he was he didn't make the list because he's not even projected for double digits at a home run.
Actually, when I was looking up guys, MJ Melendez was someone I looked at, but it would take too big of a jump in stolen base attempts. Like he hasn't hit double digits yet, like 7 or 8 stolen bases, but I could see him getting to double digits, like we talked, especially the later we get here. The possibility of getting an actual 2020 guy is going to get very,
Oh,
very
yes.
slim.
Yes.
But I think MJ Melendez could be, a 25-10, 25-15 guy.
Okay. Like seeing that swing change, like seeing the production we're seeing out of the swing change, as you mentioned.
Exactly. That's the key.
All right, jumping down another 3 rounds to 19 through 21. Only 2 guys really kind of pop out to me here. Gleyber Torres at 238, and then George Springer seems like it would be the obvious one. Again, it all comes back to injury. Also, the news that it's likely he will not be leading off for the Blue Jays, at least to start the season. Maybe switching, maybe like a platoon leadoff situation where he gets a couple games in now and again, but he struggled mightily last year as well. So George Springer still going to be probably in the top 4 of the lineup. So he's still going to get his at-bats in his opportunities. But between George Springer and Gleyber Torres, do you see either one of these guys, or you have any confidence in either one of these guys hitting the 2020 mark?
I don't know that we'll see enough stolen bases out of Gleyber Torres. I think people would be surprised, uh, based on if you just think about George Springer the past 3 seasons, we probably think of a huge disappointment. And definitely the batting average in 2024 uh, took almost a 40-point drop after 4 consecutive seasons near or above 260, and then much better prior to his career. Took almost a 40-point drop last season. That was a 46-point drop in BABIP, which contributes to that. Uh, but as he ages, may not be hitting the ball as hard. So the BABIP may be coming down. It might not just be a luck thing. There might be reasons it's coming down.
Mhm.
However, he's had a 25-14 season in 2022. He was 21-20 in 2023. So another guy that did it just 2 seasons ago. And he was really close, as disappointed as we were with his 220 batting average in 2024. He did go 19-16. So this is a guy that not even when he's not even close to his best and probably having an off year, not just aging. I think 2024 was exceptionally low. Yeah, it coming down a little bit from 2023 would be expected, but I think it bounces back up. Maybe not all the way to 2023, but it gets really close, which means he'll be close to that 2020 yet again.
Yeah, I mean, he was a very disappointing season overall last year, especially since like he was getting random like time off throughout the course of the season as well. So you
Mhm.
couldn't really feel like he was ever going to get into like a real rhythm. They kept forcing him into the leadoff spot too. So you kept getting pulled back in. You didn't want to drop him. Like, I'm not going to drop a leadoff hitter with the history that George Springer has had as well. But like you look at this rolling chart I just pulled up as well, and like there was like, I mean, he had a little bit, after the All-Star break of power, but like his power was gone. He still was running, like you said, he still got close to that number through by the end of the season. But the power was just very disappointing in general. So hopefully that can come back after a whole off season of, a rest and relaxation, and whatever he needed to do to get himself right. So, yeah, I agree that as long as he can stay healthy enough, he's the obvious choice. Just because, yeah, Glaber's never been one that I would expect to be running at a lot at all.
Yeah,
Um,
the one guy I left out when I was talking about that Beat the Shift episode a few minutes ago was George Springer
mhm.
because he was on our list. The other 2 outfielders I brought up were not, but he was the 3rd outfielder that both Ariel and Derek Carty was the guest on that episode. When Ariel Cohen and Derek Carty agree that a player is being underdrafted,
You pay
I am
attention.
in. No
Yep.
matter what, I'm in.
We got a couple more outfielders here in rounds 22 to 24 in like the 250 to 80 range of ADP. TJ Friedel at 259, and then Evan Carter at 283. I mean, we're getting into the nitty gritty here as we get closer and closer to the end of a draft. But do either of these guys play enough, honestly, to get to that 2020 mark?
Yeah, that's the big question, and unfortunately, I don't think TJ Friedel does. I'm not certain that Evan Carter will, but I definitely think there's a better chance. Uh, he was hampered by a lot of injuries in 2024, and now we're hearing that he could be the leadoff hitter for the Texas Rangers when they knocked Marcus Semien down lower in the order, that spot where for years Marcus Semien was getting about 750 plate appearances. If Evan Carter could be the everyday leadoff hitter for the Texas Rangers, then he could make a true run at 2020 this late in the draft.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that call out. TJ Fredo was exciting for that minute.
Yeah.
And he did some nice things at the end. I think it was at the end of 2023, made some people who picked him up, especially in their head-to-head leagues, very happy. Did not something I'm relying on moving forward. All right, the last couple, we got 2 more groups here. We'll go to round 25 to 27. A couple extra guys here, 3 guys here listed out here. We've got Joe Adele at 302 Tyro Estrada at 304, and then Luke Raley right behind those guys at 320. You talked sweet nothings about Tyro Estrada on the last episode we recorded. So I'm assuming he's your pick here, but between these three guys, I mean, I guess this is a threesome. I should play Ask, but I'm trying to hold back. I'm trying not to just play Ask all the time. But like, I will still ask you, Tyro Estrada, is that your keep here? Like, is this the guy that you would be targeting? Because, obviously of the location that he's playing in, the role that he seems to have kind of locked down here, and the time and like where he will actually be in that lineup.
Yep. We've talked a lot about him this offseason, and he's actually my favorite on this list. When incorporating draft price into it, he is my favorite of all these players, is Tyro Estrada. But we've talked a lot about him. Both Joe Adell and Luke Raley, I think, when we talk platoons, if they played full seasons, they would both be 2020 guys. Easy, in my opinion. Well, maybe not easy. Luke Raley doesn't get quite the stolen base attempts that it would take. But we talked about Luke Raley on this episode last season. And you brought up the fact that coming up through the minors, the speed was his calling card.
That's the only thing he did. Yeah.
Yeah. And now he did get to double digits. And then he did get to the over 20 home runs. So for a strong side platoon player, pretty strict platoon player, I very happy with that production, and would be again. Joe Adell, I did have concerns that Mickey Moniak may get actually more playing time than him, but it sounds like he has made a slight swing adjustment as well that may cut down on his strikeout rate, similar to MJ Melendez. If that's the case, we could be looking at a true breakout from Joe Adell, who, like Luke Raley, is going to be a 2010 guy probably anyway, even just as a strong side platoon player with his swing strike issues. If he takes a step forward, we could. I mean, it's a late one, but we could still see a breakout from Joe Adell. But Tyro Estrada, I am confident that I would almost say that I would project Tyro Estrada for a 2020 season.
Yeah, Joe Adell didn't even make my list, so you added him on here because, again, I was going strictly on PLV projections. PLV not liking his opportunity in general at 271 plate appearances on the season, so that he's being projected out at just a 10, at an 11 home run, 4 stolen base season.
That was the word I brought up last week. He could be short side platoon.
If he ends up getting to that mark, those projections make sense. If he does get that extra playing time, you want to extrapolate that. Of course, that gets him a lot closer to that possible 2020. But if you double that up to just over 500 plate appearances, 550 plate appearances, he's still going to have to run a little bit more than he's shown. And Joe Adell has already shown that he's got a lot of things on his mind to focus on, just to be a little bit more consistent at the plate. But maybe once he's on base, all he has to think about is running. Maybe he'll do that a little bit more often.
All of the public projections on Fangraphs have him for approximately the plate appearances he had last season, which is he had 450. They have him between 430 and 480. So roughly, every projection system does have him hitting the 20 home runs. They also have him in the mid-teens in stolen bases. So yeah, like we talked with several of these guys, it's about the playing time. But unfortunately, Joe Adell, like we talked, I keep saying last week, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, last episode.
Last episode. Yeah, I'm afraid he could be the short side platoon guy at least a lot of the time.
So the thing, Joe Adell got that many plate appearances last year because the Angels needed a body to actually take the field, that was breathing and could. And
they have Mike Trout, Jorge Soler in the lineup now too.
Yeah, and so for now, knock on wood.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. So he might get the plate appearances again.
All right, last group here at the end of your drafts. These are the true darts that you could be taking if you're not focused just on Dodgers and Cubs pitchers. Weiler Abreu at 338, Brandon Marsh at 341, Ha Seung Kim at 347, Dylan Moore 353, Jordan Lawler. I don't know what role he's playing, but you can tell me about that at 353. And then Cabrian Hayes rounds it out right at the end at 359 ADP. Of course, also a lot of these guys they're not getting drafted in every 12 team draft at the end of the 30th round as well. So you can get a lot of these guys closer to the 30th round rather than having to stretch out to the 28th round. But if you've only got that one dart to play with in your last 3 rounds, which one are you focused most on of this group?
The fantasy baseball gods are going to feel bad about Chase DeLauder and give us a healthy Jordan Lawler for an entire season, then he's my guy.
There you go.
Uh, the Diamondbacks have said that a lot of people were worried about the Perdomo signing and the amount of money. Diamondbacks have said this doesn't have anything to do with Jordan Lawler. When he's ready, he's on this team. He's looking really good in the spring. Nice triple on Friday, I believe it was, that I got to see as I was watching. If he is up early, he's definitely my guy here. But I like this entire group. One, they're not being drafted
Right.
everywhere, right? So we will get to talk about them in season. These guys will be available in FAAB in a lot of leagues. Weiler Abreu would be my choice here if I thought he was going to get the playing time. But even without Roman Anthony and Christian Campbell, I don't know. I still don't know what the Red Sox are doing.
Well, they're not, and there's
And
also
you probably have some clarification on this.
there's more news that he might not be ready for opening day, along
Mhm.
with Crawford and others and Bayo. And so there's a whole string of Red Sox that not only are dealing with like illnesses going around, but also just not ramping up fast enough. So Abreu could just be opening up the opportunity for Roman Anthony. Christian Campbell is now taking more outfield reps in spring training as well, just to keep their options open. Because the infield is a little bit tighter than we thought it might be going into spring training with the Alex Bregman deal, and just all the other options that they have in the middle infield as well. So, I mean, Abreu might not even be an like on the board at least come the beginning of the season, and Abreu is not somebody I'm willing to lose a bench spot over in a
Mm.
league that I don't have any IL spots.
Yeah. So playing time was my worry with him.
Mm,
And it sounds like you're in agreement there. Brandon Marsh is becoming more and more of a platoon guy by the day.
sure.
Otherwise, he would be up there. But like we said, that's going to be the types of players we find that have this skill set at this late in the draft. Hey, Song Kim, another guy we talked about last year in this on this episode, would definitely be on my list again this year. But heard from Tampa today that they're penciling him in for the end of May. So that's only 2/3 of a season. That and that's if everything goes well. That was the first like actual timeline I had seen on that. So that gives me a little reserve there. Now, if Jordan Lawler does not make the Arizona Diamondbacks lineup early in the season, Dylan Moore could be closer to this than many of the guys being drafted way ahead of him. We've talked about him quite a bit this offseason. I always bring up the caveat. If you're in an OBP league, Dylan Moore should be drafted in every league. He is that valuable in OBP leagues. There's such a huge discrepancy between his batting average and his OBP. But the more and more playing time. And when Jorge Polanco went back to Seattle, I was a little worried, but Seattle has said Jorge Polanco is the third baseman.
Hmm.
So that does take away a couple of utility options for Dylan Moore, but it still sounds like they're planning on him getting a lot of playing time, maybe even against some righties. I wouldn't advise having him in my lineup versus righties if I'm in a batting average league. Usually, and for a weekend or something when you don't want to take zeros in your counting stats, that's why I have him on many of my NFBC teams, is for that purpose, because he can fill it in at any position. But Dylan Moore is a guy, he'd be 40-40 if we could face lefties every day.
There we go. Always think positive. Name I
Yeah.
left off the list just because of injury concerns, supposedly not as concerning as they once were, is Dalton Varsho of Toronto. Hit a couple home runs in his first couple spring training games, and he's saying all the right things as far as being ready for opening day and not starting off on the IL. Never mind coming back early in the season. But I mean, if Darshan Varsho can be healthy all year round, he has just as much of a chance as anybody, especially going this late in drafts. And if he can just spend the majority of the first month or two as the DH in Toronto, as Roster Resource has projected him to be, at the very, again, at the worst, strong side of a platoon, just to give him some unofficial rest days here or there to rest, to rest his from his shoulder surgery. This he's very close to being, a PLV darling as far as the projections go. I think, yeah, they've got him at 22 home runs and 16 stolen bases. So, any kind of coming back from any kind of surgery, even if it's not lower body, still going to be worried about running the bases and taking those chances and irritating something. Diving headfirst into second base is going to, affect your shoulder in some way. But Dalton Varsho, if actually healthy, this late in the draft, sure, as an option, if you feel confident about his health as well, he can definitely do it. Kevin is staring me down, be like, "No, you're wrong. You can say that if you disagree with me, Kevin."
Oh, no. I agree. Uh, I don't have any Dalton Varsho. Been
Yeah.
worried that we weren't gonna see him opening day, but if we are, I'm intrigued, and I will see where he starts to be being picked up, for sure. I was actually reading, some of Uncle Ted's, comments. He likes Lazaro Montes in Seattle. I don't know if we see him to start the season, but, yeah, I'm a sucker for Dylan Moore, just with all that position eligibility, and he does crush lefties, literally crushes them. That's where he gets the 20 home runs from for this 2020. And I was worried once again. The Polanco signing worried me about my Dylan Moore shares, but they have come out and said Polanco's the third baseman, so
Mhm.
not that bad.
Jose Caballero is my new Dylan Moore in Tampa Bay. You got to draft him a little bit earlier just because of the recent success. But he's like
And even
literally,
more stolen bases.
yeah, he's
Yeah.
literally Dylan Moore, just with one less eligibility and more stolen bases. And probably, well, we'll see how much more playing time. That's actually a good little side bet. Like, who do we think will end up getting more plate appearances by the end of the season, Caballero or Dylan Moore? And if with Dylan Moore, it'll all be about if he can actually hit above 200 on a regular basis. They'll keep him throwing him out there. But as soon as he regularly goes below 200 on a regular basis, they're going to start, turning him back into what he's best at, is that pinch hitter, pinch runner, in a pinch we can throw you out there type of player. So super utility, as the term is normally called. Kevin, this is fun. This is fun, just kind of like speculating on old boring guys who can kind of do a little bit of everything, and hopefully one of them kind of cracks through the shell and does a little bit more than at least what the projections think they're going to do. It would be really I don't want it to be easy, but it would have been more entertaining to like go through. I'm going also looking through Uncle Ted's comments, and a lot of the comments he's suggesting are very young or they're rookies, like you mentioned. Obviously, Montes
Yeah.
probably not going to start the season. Those are the shiny toys that everybody wants to take a dart on, but knowing that those players already exist, it's kind of like it's like the family the Family Guy meme, or that scene where it's like it could be anything, even a boat. Like you could go after these young guys, like, hey, they could be anything, even Dylan Moore. Like they could be at whatever point. So it would
I
have
will
been easy.
never forget my first trip to First Pitch, Arizona, and Dave Potts, who was still I believe, the only player to win 2 $1 million prizes, in DFS. His statement was, I'm a multi-millionaire because I take these old, boring guys that none of you want.
Not- there we
I'll
go.
never forget that, and it's a fact. That's how he wins.
Yep. Take all the old borings.
Yeah.
Well, it was still fun talking about the old boring guys. Kevin,
Yeah.
close this out with something a little bit more exciting, hopefully.
Well, we brought up a few minutes ago, the season's sneaking up on us. It's
Yes,
close.
that is
So that
exciting.
we have 3 weekends, and by the time most people are listening to this episode, 2 weekends, the 2 big draft weekends left, right? No regrets. If Yes, do your research. Yes, pay attention to what things are telling you. But if you like a player, you're gonna be way more upset if he succeeds and you didn't take him than you will be if you take him and you're wrong.
Mhm.
So, if there's players you have a strong feeling on, uh, don't let someone else grab them. That's my advice for these 2 big draft weekends.
Yeah, you just end up kicking yourself for the first couple weeks of the season.
It's so much worse if you don't draft them and
Oh,
they
and they go
beat
off.
you.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
And that happens more. At least you feel like
Oh,
it happens more often.
Murphy's Law, it's 100% it
Yeah, of
happens
course.
when you don't take 'em.
And you don't remember the ones that you were successful on, but you definitely remember the ones that kicked you in the butt after the fact.
Right. It's like bad beats. You don't remember when they go your way.
All right. Well, after all that and everything else, that's going to wrap it up for episode 204 of On the Wire. Thank you so much for joining us. On behalf of Kevin Hasting, I am Adam Howe. Thanks for listening, and we bid you goodbye.